right, so I think we're rolling, so I'll begin. Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation on mixed reality multiliteracies. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the multiliteracies framework and how we used it to develop an instructor's manual for Turkish language competence. My name is Nicole Schmidt, and this is Betul.
This is Betul Czerkawski. I'm a professor of Instructional Design and Technology at the University of Arizona.
Right, and I'm also an instructional designer here at the University of Arizona, who has recently completed the second language acquisition and teaching dissertation program, PhD program. Right, so first we're going to outline a few of the most important points concerning the multiliteracies framework, and particularly discuss the learning by design pedagogical approach that was developed by Calantes and Co. And after that, we'll talk about more generally about instructor manuals in the 21st century and some problematic aspects of them. After that, Betul will share with you some of her examples of mixed realities in a Turkish instructor's manual that she's used Adobe Spark to develop, and then we will put it all together with a wrap-up discussion on the teacher's guide that she's created. So just to start out with, the multiliteracies framework is a framework that some of you may already be familiar with. Basically, multiliteracies came out of the technological revolution of the mid-1990s, when a group of scholars, literacy scholars, came together to discuss how the old archaic notions of flat paper-based literacy may no longer really apply or be 100% accurate in the world that we were now living in. They decided that there is actually no standard right or wrong way to approach literacy, and that in this era of technology development and globalization, students really respond to a variety of different dialects, registers, cross-cultural discourses, linguistic code switching, and multicultural gestural and meaning-making practices. So in other words, in this day and age, we have many different forms of expression, many different ways that we express ourselves, and many different discursive communities and activities that we participate in from day to day. So the idea of being literate goes beyond just the paper-based version of reading and writing. It really embodies a very complex system of code switching and navigating through different modalities and different cultural communities, maybe even on a daily basis for some students. So the main features of the multiliteracies framework are that it is democratic and that it is inclusive. So one of the main things that happened with the development of technology is that new pathways were instantly created to sort of even the playing fields for many students who may not have previously had access to other communities outside of their own. Technology and online spaces really made it possible for us to communicate cross-culturally more easily. So it became more inclusive, a more inclusive way to look at literacy. Second, the New London group in particular, and then many authors subsequently, really stressed multimodality and the idea that literacy is something that is conveyed in many different modes. It is not just conveyed through the written word. So a large point of critique in this regard was the focus on logocentrism and verbal knowledge, conveying verbal knowledge. So looking at different means of conveying knowledge and ideas and concepts was really valued. And then this all sort of weaves together with the idea of multiculturalism and multilingualism. You know, as you know, technology was expanding our horizons. It was connecting us to people all across the world, and people of many different languages. So the idea of what literacy is became gradually came to embody multiculturalism and multilingualism as well. And of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, Multiliteracies framework uses digital design as one of its core components. So one very interesting take on multiliteracies the framework is multiliteracies pedagogy, particularly the form developed by Competence around 2015. And what they did was they really outlined the how rather than the what of multiliteracies pedagogy. So they took a lot of the core concepts of multiliteracies framework and thought about how it could be practically applied by actual teachers within the context of primarily of language teaching, but within the context of literacy education. So Competence envisioned multiliteracies as a reflexive pedagogy. And what this meant was that it was sort of a combination of traditional didactic pedagogy, which is more rule-based, teacher-centric, drill-based, the teacher is positioned at the front of the classroom, and authentic pedagogy, which is more exploratory and learner-centric and experiential. So the idea is that a reflexive pedagogy is one in which the educator understands how to wield both didactic and authentic pedagogy strategically in a way that's pragmatic and appropriate for the group of learners with whom they are interacting. And so their focus was not directly on teacher cognition or learner cognition, but rather reframed as knowledge processes or epistemic actions that people take in order to learn. So, you know, instead of having these lofty ideas of cognitive processes, they wanted to make it something that's more tangible for the educator to actually apply in the classroom. So out of this idea of knowledge processes came 4 different categories based on pre-existing cognitive orientations of knowledge. And these are experiencing, conceptualizing, analyzing, and applying. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about these 4 categories or these 4 knowledge processes in the next slide. It is important to point out, though, before I move on, that these 4 categories are all seen as nonlinear. So they are, they're woven together, they're symbiotic in nature, and they are combined reflexively by the educator. So even though they're called processes, they don't go in a particular process or a particular predetermined order. So for example, you don't necessarily have to begin with experiencing and then move on to conceptualizing and then analyzing after that. Instead, the educator, it's up to the instructor or the educator to decide how to combine these different categories. Just like the quote says here at the bottom of the slide, the essential idea in the multiliteracies approach is that learning is a process of weaving backwards and forwards across and between different pedagogical moves. Right, so this table here sort of outlines what to expect with these 4 different knowledge processes and how they can be applied to L2 learning. So first you have experiencing, which can either be experiencing the known. So for the student, that would be their own background knowledge, their own authentic real life experiences or life worlds, or experiencing the new, which would be an immersion into a new or unfamiliar situation. So the first one, experiencing the known, has to do with how a student might articulate pre-existing beliefs, how they might deconstruct their identity or support their own stance with regard to a concept or an issue. Experiencing the new, however, would include activities in which they are going out into the world or surfing the web and observing a new phenomenon. And in this is all based on their new observations, on how they record new data or these new experiences, how they make inferences based on those, and how they reflect. Conceptualizing then is regarded as either conceptualizing by naming or conceptualizing with theory. And conceptualizing with naming is sort of how learners organize information according to different discourses or different scholarly sort of groups of knowledge, right? So how would they categorize, for example, how would L2 learners categorize a genre based on the text features, right? So conceptualizing with theory is to take those concepts or those categories that they've already created and to then extrapolate a theory from them. Competence offer that teachers should be wary, though, not to let the conceptualizing with theory fall ahead of the experiencing. So conceptualizing and experiencing often go together because it's hard to conceptualize something that you haven't experienced. And then we move on to analyzing. Analyzing can occur either functionally through the deconstruction of a process, an object, or a concept, or critically, in which a student might interrogate human intentions and interests. So the first one often involves argumentation, logical reasoning. For instance, in an L2 class, it might be, summarize a movie or a book or an article. And analyzing critically would be maybe to argue a viewpoint. You're really deconstructing sort of the messaging behind that, the cultural messaging and the power structures that are in place there. So you might be critiquing the movie rather than summarizing it in that case. So this can be done in many different modalities, and one of the cautions given by Competence here is that you should be very careful not to only focus on the written word in your analysis, but to engage in all of these different modalities that are available. And then finally, we have applying. And applying can be done either appropriately through real-world authentic tasks, such as learning how to drive a car, or applying creatively, which involves the transfer of knowledge across contexts of use. So for example, in an L2 context, applying appropriately might involve learning how to structure an essay, right? For example, you're learning how to do something that is generally already done in society, and you're learning how to do it the way most people do it. Applying creatively, however, is more like transforming an essay into a video narrative. So you're taking something that's generally done in one way and applying it in a new context or redesigning it for a new message or a new theme or to a new audience, right? So those are the different knowledge processes, and that is a brief overview of the multiliteracies pedagogy as it was explained by Competence, and that is what we used in our study. So now I'm going to hand the floor over to Betul, who will give you some background on teacher guides and let you know what she's done specifically.
For this study, we wanted to create a teacher guide specifically for LD learners using augmented reality technologies. Well, starting from augmented reality, and we will eventually move to virtual reality. So first we looked at the teacher guides, and we saw that in the literature there are some limitations to it as well as some advantages. First of all, if an idea is new, if a technology or a concept is new, teacher guides are very valuable. They're also helpful if a topic requires extensive practices and drill and practice exercises, especially teaching of grammar at the introductory levels. We found out that they are very helpful. Also, if a teacher is new to the environment, new to the content, new to the teaching profession, teaching guides are also very helpful. But in the literature, there is also some discussion about how useful they are in terms of being creative. If teacher wants to be creative in terms of creating new activities. Sometimes there are some negative impact of using teacher guides because they don't align necessarily with the classroom dynamics. There was also, we came up with literature that said for those students who are at risk, teacher guides are not necessarily considering them. It's created for students who are just progressing, normally. It doesn't consider those who are on the top and who are on the very bottom. And then finally, they may not fit well with the learning objectives. And this is actually an interesting one because we found out that most of the teacher guides come with the textbooks. They are attached to the textbooks or the textbook companies. And if that is the case, they are aligned beautifully with the learning objectives. But if this is part of an open education resource or teachers find online or using other resources, we found that it's difficult to find the alignment between objectives and the teacher guides. Next, please. Another interesting thing about teacher guides is that since almost 2000, we could not find much research. So then it comes to mind, so are these, in terms of research, there are teacher guides everywhere, but in terms of the research, we could not find many research at least, or being popular research topic. And then the other interesting finding is that for the 21st century, our teaching guides, they are too prescriptive, they are too limiting to the teachers. Now that we are talking about not the whole curriculum from the instructional design perspective, but individual lessons, individual topics and activities, is it really limiting? Of course, not in the online environment, but for the actual classroom environment, it can be difficult to capture the dynamics of the classroom, the dynamics of the needs of the students, and they may also get very old if we are talking about emerging technologies. In terms of their effectiveness, we also could not find any recent wide range of research when it came to teacher guides. And of course, the dominance of the good ones all came from the textbook companies that also made us wonder how effective they are in general. So mixed realities, by mixed realities, we understand a combination of augmented reality and virtual reality technologies. And in the literature, it's considered on a continuum. Augmented realities when it's sort of very close in terms of interaction to the real life. In virtual reality, you completely move from real environment to a virtual environment. For this study, we looked at augmented reality only and did some literature review. And if you notice, I'm not going to go into the detail of this individual studies, but you'll notice that most of the studies are conducted at K-12 level and in STEM fields, mostly in STEM fields. We found out that there are a lot of companies that offer sort of targeted augmented reality experiences for the elementary education students and K-12 students. At the higher education level, we found some literature aligning with the gaming and how to create games using augmented reality or virtual reality. And outside of STEM fields, especially in L2, we were not able to find many research studies. Actually, a few of the research studies came from our own University of Arizona SLAT students. So in terms of the benefits, why do we bother about augmented realities or mixed realities in general? What do they contribute? First of all, they help personalizing individual, personalizing instruction. Students can learn at their own pace. And obviously, with every new and emerging technologies, number one influence will be the student engagement and motivation, something new, something different, and something they can engage using their phone or tablet computers. It's also possible, especially using virtual reality, providing authentic learning experiences in the target language. Cultural immersion, if the purpose of the instruction is to provide cultural experiences to the students, unique experiences, then augmented and virtual reality be very beneficial. And then finally, traveling is not always the best option, especially given our current circumstances. So you can access to authentic language materials in the target country, target language country, without traveling. So, and there's also that kind of benefit. Let's move forward. In the literature, unfortunately, there were also some challenges. Well, first of all, the tools we use for this study, it was free, but for virtual reality, all the good tools were very expensive. Accessibility was an issue. Not every student, especially if you're teaching in the online and or blended environment, not every student would have access to those tools. And not so much with the augmented reality. In virtual reality, there's also some visual strain on the eyes. Not everybody can handle those graphics for a long time. I personally love Oculus, but I cannot use it more than 20 minutes in, you know, okay, I'm wearing glasses, but even with me, it's more than 20 minutes and definitely I get dizzy. Although it's getting better, definitely getting better. Instructor buy-in is very important, and not many instructors are using in language environment augmented reality. And they don't know it, they don't have many training available, and once they don't know what it is, they are not really convinced that they can use it comfortably. Obviously, some of the tools are very simple, very easy to use, but then, and I'll talk that in a minute, they want to see some integration technology, integration examples and strategies. How can I use it? Okay, this is a great tool. I can see the opportunities, but what can I do with it? Give me some examples, give me some models. And the language environment, the foreign language environment, there are some examples we found in the language arts, in general, teaching of language arts, but in L2, we were not able to find many examples that show the instructors how to use them in a meaningful way. So for this teacher guide, we use successive approximation model of Allen. There are two different versions of it. We use the SAM1, which is a very simple instructional design approach. Basically, right now, we are designing, trying, and developing. And so in this approach, the main idea is that rather than going ahead and developing the whole thing, develop a little module, little example, and then evaluate if it's going well, then go ahead and create other examples. So it's a continuous process. You don't stop at the design, you develop and you integrate ideas, you evaluate, come back and keep doing it in a circular mode. So this was a general, very simple instructional design approach we used in our guide. So what are some of the characteristics of our guide? How by looking at the literature, I mentioned how we apply these ideas. Well, first of all, we created an Adobe Spark page, which we're going to share with you in a minute. We didn't want to use a traditional website program. We wanted this to be a very visual, very accessible, very quick guide. And we didn't want to use lots of words. We didn't want to, link those multiple documents. And so, on the surface, it looks a website, a visual, but in the back, there's just a lot of documents attached to it. We didn't want that. So I have to say that we are not done yet. We are just still developing this website. And rather than providing those, long documentations, we want to provide actual examples and how-to guides. Although our focus is in mixed realities, we also want to use other technologies, and especially some of the other Adobe products using those technologies, creating some experiences, hopefully to integrate within the mixed realities. By that, what I mean is that when you create a visual experience, those visual experiences need to be created by you. So I'm not talking about the content, but the pictures, the videos, the sounds, and all that information. So for instance, creating a picture in Photoshop and then bringing it into augmented reality. So although the focus, as I said, is on the mixed realities, there is other technologies used in the guide. So for augmented reality, we have different tools, have different approaches to it, but we would prefer a very simple program called Metaverse. Now, in the Metaverse, it generates, once you create an example, it generates a QR code. And basically, you get your tablet, an iPhone, or any mobile device you might have. And you don't even have to have the metaverse, and then you point it out, and then the experience starts playing. 3D videos. So the plan was that, by the way, we did this for Turkish, also because I'm a native speaker, and that's the language I feel more comfortable with. But hopefully, these examples can be replicated in other languages as well. The 3D video section, the plan for me this summer was to go to my native country and get some 3D videos and then bring it back this fall and create the virtual reality. That did not happen, unfortunately, but that will happen in the future. So that's the reason we sort of couldn't finish the virtual reality part. Let's move on. So here's the site. Because it's been created with the Spark on the presentation, there is the URL of the site. It is not the best URL, but here it is. It's Spark. This is a Turkish sort of old lightning. It's the bazaar in Istanbul. For those who visited Istanbul, let's scroll it down, Nicole. It's just one page, so it's, as I said, we are just keeping this as simple as possible. So when you scroll the website, this is where you can access the Multiliteracies framework for those who are not familiar with it, with the examples of it, what can be done, because this is where the integration comes from. So, okay, I have the technology, I know how it works, but what can I do with it? Here is our examples. Let's click on it. Let's show what we have. So Google Docs. Metaverse is the program. You'll see you can download it on your device. Going onto the App Store, you don't have to create an account. You just need to have the app itself. So for each of them, there is a different QR code and alignment with the Multiliteracies framework. What you need to be doing is just pointing at your device, but you have to take one QR code at a time. You don't want to just take all three at the same time. And then as soon as you do that, the experience will play. So in terms of the Multiliteracies framework, if you can look at it, it's in the first 2 stages. We did not go down to analysis because we struggle a lot, how to create those kinds of complex learning experiences using this technology. It just requires a lot of thinking of the learning objectives, the curriculum, the resource, the technology, the affordability of the technology. It's just it is very difficult. So that's why we started creating these examples. Please note that this is work in progress. So as we go, we will keep adding more to it. And then you will have various examples. The first one is a very simple vocabulary example. The second one, it wasn't created by me, by the way, the first one. The second and third one I created. The second one is just to teach students the differences between formal and informal greeting, how Turkish people greet each other, which is linked to a YouTube video at the end of the experience. The last one is a literature one. It is created for discussing one of Orhan Pamuk's texts. But before the activity, students get engaged into this one to learn more about the author and the main emphasis of the reading. So these are all very simple starter activities, but I hope that now I do have many other language examples, but these three are specifically in Turkish since we want to keep this a Turkish only activity. Let's go back, Nicole. So we have a long list of references if you're interested in the augmented reality research. Augmented reality, if you pay attention, these are all very recent data. There's almost an explosion of research. But language and foreign language instruction it's not there. We definitely need to see more examples of it. And that's the end. Thank you so much for listening. Here's our emails if you want to send us or just send comments to the conference site so we can come online and answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Hope to see you in the live chat session.